As you've probably noticed by now, over these past number of Sundays, that we're in that place in the gospel, according to St. Matthew, where Jesus Christ is continually being confronted by his adversaries. It's just conflict after conflict after conflict. And quite literally, the adversaries of Jesus Christ are hammering him relentlessly, hoping that they can wear him down, break him down, get him to say something that would publicly discredit him in the eyes of all the faithful. And so we look at today's gospel and we're told that the Pharisees heard that Jesus silenced the Sadducees. And so now they're going into another round. So the Pharisees gather themselves in a group, and then one of them comes forward. And what's interesting is his question to Jesus Christ. Teacher, which commandment of the law is the greatest? What's interesting is that the scribe who came forward didn't call Jesus a teacher because he wanted to become his student. And he didn't ask him which commandment was the greatest because he wanted to be instructed. It's malice. But be that as it may, the question is still a good question. And Jesus' answer, of course, is an excellent and perfect answer. In fact, he responds with the very law he gave to Moses himself back in the day. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Now, I think generally speaking, if you were to ask somebody, well, what does that mean? Why does the commandment say with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind? Why is it, separated out that way? And even other gospels include with all your strength. And I think generally speaking, people would say, well, that means that you're to love God with all that you have. Well, and certainly that's true. But what does that mean? What does that mean? And so what I want to do this morning is we're just going to briefly explore how St. John Chrysostom understands today's gospel and what he taught the faithful under his pastoral care. To love God with all your heart, St. John Chrysostom would say, is to love God, with the passion of your body, the affection that is in your heart. And this is something that we can all understand. We experience a certain fondness within ourselves for people we like, for people we love. And so St. John Chrysostom would say, well, it's no different for God. We should love God with the affection of our heart. But see, we know that love, however, is not simply an emotion. And where do we get that, kind of fake controversy? Is love an emotion or is it a decision? Sometimes we have this conversation. And of course, I know you all understand. People will say, well, it's not either or. It's both. But why are we even having the conversation? That's what's important. The reason why we're having the conversation is because we have been so deeply wounded by original sin. You see, where our original integrity has been fractured by original sin, so that our heart no longer agrees with our mind in all matters. They remain divided. And you already know this. Because how many times in your life, and if you say never, I know you're not telling the truth, how many times in your life, have you done something because you knew it was the right thing, but it irked you to no end that you had to do it? You see, that's where this disconnect comes in. So that action is still very good, but it's not morally perfect because your heart is not in agreement. Emotionally, there is a disconnect. For actions to be morally perfect, it has to be a good action, and your feelings, as it were, have to concur with what you're doing. So this is a very long way of getting around to what St. John Chrysostom is going to say next about loving God with all of our soul. That is, with the judgment of reason. Let's look at it this way. Take it from the perspective of, the transcendentals, the true, the good, and the beautiful. The reason why we love things that are true, good, and beautiful are precisely because they're good, true, and beautiful. So if you were to approach somebody and say, why do you love that painting so much? Because it's beautiful. Or we'll say, you should read this book. It's really good. So we naturally gravitate towards things that are true, good, and beautiful. These are the things that we love based on the judgment of reason. We probably don't even know that that's what we're doing, but that's what we're doing. Well, who is true, good, and beautiful? Who is the origin of these things? It is God himself. So it is with a judgment of reason. I ought to love God because he is my origin and my final end, my supreme good. That makes him lovable. So we unite these two things together. The affection of our heart with the judgment of reason. But then there's a third dimension of love. And it probably is not one that has necessarily occurred to us. But we do it without necessarily know that that's what we're doing. And it's what love has to do with the mind. What does it mean to love God with all our mind? Well, because love has consequences. Love has consequences. What are those consequences? Well, when you love someone, I'm not telling you something you don't already know. When you love someone, they come to occupy your thoughts, don't they? They tend to occupy your thoughts. And as the one you love occupies your thoughts, what are the things that you're considering? How might I please the one I love? You can think back, parents, you'll probably, recognize that there was that certain age, when your son suddenly took an interest in grooming himself in the morning before he went to school, and you knew why, right? That's because love has consequences. His little heart is smitten, right? Now all of a sudden, grooming is like a priority. And you don't have to ask. You already know that's what's going on, okay? So clearly, though, however, with God is that, we're talking about, the consequence of our love for him is going to express itself in our prayer, in an intimate dialogue between our heart and his. And it's not only going to be during formal moments of prayer, but throughout the day, there are going to be those moments of recollection when we call to mind our beloved. We raise our hearts and our minds to God. And remember the one with whom we are so deeply enamored. And how might we please him by recognizing and doing his will in all things? And so this is where, we come to understand what it means to love God with our whole self. To love him with our heart, with our soul, and with our mind. But now what's interesting is that, the scribe came forward and he only asked Jesus what was the greatest commandment. And Jesus answers the question, but then he introduces a bonus answer. There's a second commandment. It's very much like the first. It's not identical, but it's so closely related to the first that the whole law and the prophets depend on these two. To love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, this is the point where I could be naughty, as I have in the past, in commenting on that commandment, because, experience simply, tells you that there's an awful lot of people in this world who don't love themselves very much. And if they're supposed to love me the way they love themselves, it's like, please don't. Please don't. But be that as it may, what does it mean, to love others as we love ourselves? Well, we'll notice the ordering of the commandments. Before others must come our love of self. And the thing is, and why we can easily recognize, that we don't want to be loved by people who don't love themselves, is because we already know that ordering. And so it begs the question, well, what does it mean to love myself? Well, I think you already know the answer. Because I would suggest it's self-evident. But the love for yourself begins with the love for your soul. Above all considerations, all things that can be considered, it is the love of your soul that takes priority. Your personal sanctification and your salvation. Obtaining all that you hope for. Your, blessedness. The vision of God face to face. Heaven. Right? These are the things that we ought to love about ourselves above all things. And so when the care of our soul and its sanctification become a priority, then guess what? That becomes your priority in loving others as well. Did I ever tell you that anecdote about this truly awful documentary I saw, probably a couple decades ago? And it took place on one of the seedier side streets of San Francisco. And there were drug users, and there's these do-gooders. I think I've always described them as having $50 haircut and Gap jeans. They're out there to do something good. And so they're going out there and they're giving clean needles to drug users so that they don't spread AIDS among themselves. And they're showing, these people giving a needle to this guy. And then these people walk away, satisfied that they've done their good deed. And then what this man does is he looks at his handful of clean needles and he slumps down along the side of a car and starts weeping. You see, the next hit was not his priority. He said, I want to be loved. I want to be loved. He was so terribly lonely. That's how we can think, well, we know we're doing a good deed, this is so loving, this is the compassionate thing to do. And it's like, how can you even say that? When first you don't stop and listen to a person's story and discern what it is they truly need. That his body doesn't need drugs, his heart needs love. Right? So I kind of use that to kind of, illustrate the point. So, but be that as it may, when it comes to loving others, And I get it. This is where it gets really super difficult. Is that, especially parents, when your children are young and misbehave, it's very easy to correct them, isn't it? But then they become teenagers and they get a little older. Then the choices they make and the things they do become a little more complicated, doesn't it? We think about the things that people do that become complicated, and we fear losing their friendship, we fear losing their esteem, and so we say nada about the harmful things they do to themselves. See, that's not loving. I think people fear, the burst, of stop judging me. Well, you're not. You're not. With great kindness and gentleness and humility, you can inform errant people that their decisions they're making are harmful, and you can propose to them another path and invite them to consider it, to take a step closer to Christ, not one further away from him. That is the loving thing to do. So there you have it. The two great commandments: love God, love one another as we love ourselves. Now, considering everything that I have just said, everything that I have just proposed, can you see now why these commandments are so important, and how, if they were actually lived and put into practice, that this kind of love would produce the unity we desire, knowing that sin has fractured it so sorely? Because at the end of the day, isn't that the question? Right? Why love? Why love? Well, it's because God is love. You say, well, yeah, I know that. I've been told that since the time I was a kid. Right, yeah, we all get that. But see, there's implications. You see, God, who is love, created and ordered all things in that love, to be governed by love, so that there's a unity, there's a harmony to all things that God has made. But what did sin do? It ruptured, it fractured, it divided. And there's only one remedy. There's only one remedy, and that's love. And it's entering into, the original creative intention of God. Why he made and ordered all things that he did, in the way that he did, and for the things that he did. It is love that produces the union, and the harmony, that makes us one in a way that, our hearts truly desire.